Okay, we are going to walk through step by step the excitation-contraction coupling process. So I'm just going to create a little flow chart all the way down. So first what happens is we have a nerve signal that arrives at the synaptic knob, and then it releases acetylcholine into the synaptic cleft. Okay, it basically is just where a nerve meets a muscle fiber. So I'm going to abbreviate acetylcholine as ACH, and we're going to call this portion, what happens from the basically message from the nervous system is an action potential. More will come from action potentials when we get to the nervous system. So the release of acetylcholine causes sodium gates to open. Okay. As the sodium gates open, sodium diffuses into the muscle cell. Okay. This is called depolarization because sodium is a positive ion, so it makes the cell more positive. Okay. Sodium then travels down the T tubule, which if you just kind of want to jot that to the side, that it travels down the T tubule. It will then cause calcium, which is Ca++, to be released from, causes calcium release from the sarcoplasmic reticulum. So just don't forget that calcium is stored in the sarcoplasmic reticulum. So when sodium diffuses into it, travels down the T tubule, and it causes calcium to be released from the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Okay. Calcium then binds to troponin. Okay. And remember, at rest, tropomyosin is covering the active binding sites on actin. So calcium binds to troponin. It causes a shift in tropomyosin to uncover the active site on actin. Okay. So calcium binds to troponin, tropomyosin shifts, it kind of like double helix shift around, and then the active site that's on actin is open and available for myosin to bind to it. Okay. So myosin at this point has an ATP attached to it. So I'm kind of adding to my normal. So, but myosin has ATP attached. Okay. I'm going to kind of write this off to the side a little bit. So ATP breaks down into ADP, PI, and energy. Okay, remember that from bioenergetics. So the ATP will break down into ADP, PI, and releases energy. So that energy, okay, is used to bind myosin to actin and form that cross bridge. So I'm going to say energy used to form cross bridge, which is just when myosin attaches to actin. Okay, so it basically like allows for this connection to happen. So you could kind of like that helps it out. Okay, so as we continue down, so that myosin head is like energized, it attaches to actin, and then to actually pull actin or to do that power stroke, it will release ADP and PI. So when ATP is broken down into this, I guess if you kind of want to jot that down, the enzyme that does that is myosin ATPase or MATPase. So basically, ATP is attached to the myosin globular head. It will break down into its parts, but ADP and PI are still attached to the myosin head. So the energy that's there basically energizes it to form the cross bridge and actually attach to actin. So then myosin will say, okay, you did your job. I don't need you anymore. I'm going to release ADP and PI, and that creates a power stroke, which is actually kind of the point, you know, the contraction, you could say, right? So we have the power stroke there. Then a new ATP will bind to the myosin globular head. Okay, so new ATP binds to myosin, which will break the bond with actin. Okay, so if a new ATP didn't bind to myosin, myosin would just stay attached to actin. So a new ATP has to bind to myosin, it breaks the bond with actin, and then therefore the myosin is then energized. I guess you could say re-energized, and ready for the next cross bridge formation and subsequent power stroke. Okay. That constantly happens. So I'm going to kind of block this in. So we have this piece here. Okay. This will repeatedly, like what I boxed in pink here, this will just repeatedly happen over and over and over and over and over and over until the stimulation from the central nervous system ends. Okay. So as, I know I'm running out of room here, so I'm going to just say stimulation ends, which then means calcium back into, oops, and then no ACH release, and then the muscle will relax. Sorry, I'm running out of room. Okay, so the stimulation ends, calcium's pumped back into the sarcoplasmic reticulum because acetylcholine's not released, and the muscle relaxes. Okay, there's one other thing I want to kind of add to this. If we just shift this over a little bit, we could basically kind of say that this portion here, okay, kind of breaking it down, this is going to be like the actual, like how the filaments slide on each other, okay? Where this part up here is going to be the depolarization, repolarization, okay? And that means that things become more positive. Now when we get down here and stimulation ends, it will return back to negative, so it becomes repolarized, which that will come more with the action potentials and the nervous system. So I'm not super concerned, but just to point it out, basically the components that make up the excitation-contraction coupling is this depolarization, repolarization, which is just dictated by the nervous system, and then the sliding filament model, which is the actual mechanism by which the filaments slide over each other. So I'm just going to run through this real quick one last time. We get a nerve signal that arrives from the nervous system at the synaptic cleft where a nerve innervates a muscle cell, basically. Acetylcholine is released. We call this an action potential. The acetylcholine release opens the sodium gates. Sodium then diffuses into the cell, making it more positive. We call this depolarization. Again, we'll get more into these details on the nervous system. With the sodium influx, it causes calcium to release from the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Calcium then binds to troponin, causes a shift in tropomyosin to uncover the active site on actin. Now that that active site is available, myosin can attach to it. So myosin, to do that, it has an ATP attached, but it needs the actual energy from ATP. So by way of myosin ATPase, that's the enzyme, the ATP will break down into ADP, PI, and energy, okay? So that energy is then used to form the cross bridge. Then again, myosin doesn't need ADP and PI anymore, so it releases ADP and PI, which allows the power stroke, which is the actual pulling of myosin or pulling of actin over myosin. A new ATP has to bind with myosin for it to release the bond with actin. Once it's released, it's re-energized and ready for the next cross bridge and power stroke. So again, that ATP would then go through this whole process repeatedly. And then when stimulation from the central nervous system ends, acetylcholine isn't released anymore, calcium's pumped back into the sarcoplasmic reticulum, and the muscle relaxes. I hope that helps.